Okay guys, this is what your balloon dog will look like when it's finished, or this is the ultimate goal. A few reminders I wanted to give you that I didn't mention in the tutorial video as I was going. A couple things is just to think about making sure that when you select your colors, you really think about what you have on hand in your house. And then, like, I know I talked about using black. However, black is not going to be a great option for those lighter colors. So if you want to do a red dog or an orange dog or a pink dog, make sure you are looking for a darker version of your color. So I have this actually really dark blue that I could utilize. So when I test my colors, I can put this really dark blue next to the regular blue that I'm going to use and see that that's going to be a lot of a softer blend than it would be if I just used black. Now, I did use black to deepen some of my shadows, but that's purposely because I used a darker color. So again, if you're going to choose a red or an orange or a pink or something like that, make sure you look for a darker color that you could shade with. So for example, for red, you could use like a maroon color. For orange, you could use red, actually. For pink, you could also use red as your shade. So really think about tints and shades and not necessarily black and white. But again, I did find that kind of light blue, my regular blues, and then I grabbed the darkest blue I had, but then I also grabbed those black and whites. So finding the right colors before you start and testing them out is going to be important. I use the back of my paper, but I strongly encourage you to use your sketchbook to test so that you don't have any extra marks on the back side, just in case they do bleed through, because sometimes mark making does come through because of the indentations you make. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the nose here. So I did darken up kind of the creases in the nose, and then the knot stays pretty dark. There's not going to be much of a highlight on the knot, just because think about the end of a balloon. It's not expanded, so it's the darker version of that color. There's no need to really bring attention to it. I did color it solid, and then I kind of went with my white and just added a little bit of lightness there just to make it have a little bit more dimension. Okay, so going around here is really thinking about where your shadows are. So everywhere where there's a shape is underneath needs to be a shadow or beside it. And then when in doubt, pull up the Google Doc and look at my finished product to kind of help guide you as you are shading your own dog. All right, but I'm going to get going with the tutorial. So find your colors, test them out on a sketchbook, get your drawing paper ready, and you are ready to color. Okay guys, so today we are going to talk about coloring your balloon dog with colored pencils. So the first thing I want you to do is go search that house for some colored pencils. They did not come in your kit, but most houses in America have got some colored pencils. So what I did was I chose to make my balloon dog blue. So I've got a couple different blues as options, and then I grabbed a black and a white. So whatever color you want to do, find all of the colors that kind of fit in that color family, because you might want to use them. So like if you have red, you could grab a dark red, and if you maybe have more of like a pinky red, you could grab that. Having a darker and a lighter of your main color is going to just give you a little bit more options and make it more three-dimensional. And then I grabbed my black and white as well to help me with shading. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my lightest blue, whatever that may be. And if you just have one blue, we can still make that work. Don't worry about that. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark in with little kind of ovals where the highlights are going to be. So leaving that highlight white in the middle and just marking in some oval spots for where the highlights would be, assuming that the light is coming kind of straight on our balloon dog. The body will have a longer spot. I have to think about front and back as well. So this back leg wouldn't really have a highlight spot because it's going to be in shadow. Okay, so I've marked all my different highlight areas. So now I'm going to go ahead and start coloring. So the first thing I want you to do is just grab your regular old blue, whatever blue or whatever color you are going to start with. The regular solid, as we call it in art, we call it the hue. I'm going to start on this front ear. And basically, I'm just going to press kind of medium pressure, and I'm coloring with the curve. Whoop, I just cracked my pencil. I'm going to go ahead and go sharpen that really quick. So again, I'm coloring with short strokes around the edges of the shape, right up overlapping with my Sharpie. That Sharpie should not be an issue. It should cover up. It should still remain black as you're coloring. Now again, I mentioned I'm using about medium pressure, making sure that the paper for the most part is disappearing, but I don't want to press so hard that the colored pencil becomes waxy already on the paper. So notice how I'm kind of just getting closer and closer to that highlight spot. As I go. All right, and then once I get kind of close, I'm going to go ahead and stop. Okay, and I'm going to grab that lighter blue, and I'm going to basically overlap all this sort of middle area with that lighter blue. And I'm going to press that in first. Now, you might be saying, Mrs. Vance, that kind of stands out. It doesn't really look like, you know, that reflective surface from the Jeff Koons sculpture. It's looking just like, you know, a gradient from light blue to dark blue. Well, we're going to overlap this again. So I'm going to get myself even closer to that white highlight spot. And now I'm going to go back with the other blue, and I'm going to overlap that again. So that way the blue is mixed in, and I'm not pressing as hard this time. But that way the light blue is mixed in a little bit, but it's not overwhelming at all as I go. All right. So then my next step, and notice that I'm kind of going back and filling in some of my spots that have a little bit more white space. But my next step now is to go and kind of create that dark value. So I'm going to create my shading. Now, this front one is going to have less shading than this back one. We will think about our shadows that kind of would come over here in this side. So for this one, our shadows are really just going to be kind of around our edges. And I'm taking my black, but if you had a dark blue, you could take that as well, and you could press harder in there. Now, when I use the black, I'm making sure that I'm not pressing super hard, because otherwise it will just turn straight black. And I'm using some circular motion and some small strokes to help create more dark here. So I'm just doing it on this kind of bottom layer, and I could always go back in with my blue and overlap it again. And now I'm kind of getting that solid waxy layering down here, and that's what we want overall. We definitely don't want our project to see the innards of the paper like it is up here. This is unfinished right here. Down here, this is more of that finished texture. So I'm helping blend and go all the way up around. But what do we do with that highlight? It doesn't quite look like a highlight right now. So I'm going to grab my white and show you what to do. So I'm going to take that white colored pencil that you probably haven't even used a whole lot. Whites are not used super often. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. And then I'm going to start to kind of blend the outside. And it's okay if that white doesn't appear 100% white anymore. That's totally fine and normal. But I just want to make sure I get that whole thing covered and overlapped so that it's nice and filled in and that waxy texture comes back. And then I'm going to lightly shade in around this and kind of just keep switching back and forth until I get the look that I'm going for. And I could go back in there with that lighter blue too to help blend in this area. So again, we're looking for that smooth transition from white to dark, okay, or light to dark if that's the way you want to kind of think about it. But we definitely want to keep that white space. So I'm going to go ahead and do this back ear too, and then I'm going to let you go loose and start coloring, and I will time lapse the rest of my coloring for you. So we did talk about this back one's going to have more shadowing, right? So I'm still going to start the same way though. I'm still going to start by doing my base color first, and basically doing that almost everywhere except for that white spot. And really make sure you are shading with your shape. This is an elongated shape, so my brush strokes need to stay this way. I wouldn't want to all of a sudden color left to right. All right, and then the highlight on that back ear is going to be smaller for sure. Maybe a little skinnier, but it should be roughly in the same spot. They should mirror each other because they're technically the same shape. All right, so then I get my base blue marked in. Remember, medium pressure so that most of the white of the paper is covered up. We don't want it to be see-through at all. Okay, I am gonna go in with a little bit of my light blue. Maybe not as much as I did on the front ear, but enough to give that in there. And then I'm going to go in with my black. So remember I talked about the black needing to be more predominant in that back ear. So it's going to take up kind of this whole zone. And remember, if it turns a little too black, stop and grab your main color and then go back and blend again. If you're choosing a lighter color like a red or an orange, definitely be careful with using black. You may want to use a darker version of the color. So like if you're using orange, you can maybe grab a red or two as your quote-unquote black for the shading for your lighter color. You definitely want to play with it a little bit. You can always play in your sketchbook and make sure that it's the color you want, okay, by testing out your colors. So like I could turn over my paper and, you know, do a little, you know, shading example. Look at all the different blues you have and then, you know, put your black next to it and see if it's going to be able to blend. I definitely would test your colors before you commit to something on your page. And try not to use the back of your paper because if you press hard enough, it will go through. All right, so I'm still adding a little bit more shading over here. And then I'm going to go back with my blue. I'm gonna clean up this front one. I wanted to do a little bit more work up here. Needs to be dark at the top and the bottom, but more at the bottom than the top. And then again, I'm overlapping, layering. As I go. And now it's time for me to add in that white. And then I can go ahead and blend that in a little bit more as needed. But again, your whole goal is to get the whites of your paper to disappear, okay? So I'm gonna hold this a little closer. So we want it to be a solid color, nice and bright, versus, you know, if you look at the test area where there's no layering, you can see right through that paper. It looks more crayon, or as we think of, colored pencil-like. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to my time-lapse mode and finish coloring. Make sure you email me if you have any questions. And have a good one, guys. Good luck coloring. It's going to be great. It's going to turn out awesome.